Hello, it's Jeffrey here, and welcome to Part 4 of Advanced Ancient Stone Carving Technology Explained. In Part 4, I'm going to show you photos of advanced ancient stone carving technology, mostly from Egypt. And I'll just go through the photos just like I usually do and just explain each one. But I would have questions too, such as this photo here. I would like to know if this pyramid was completely covered with this kind of rough stone. And was this how it was done before they smoothed it off, like in this photo, where even though you can see these big gaps here, and look, they even have the knobs built in already up here at the top too. But if you were to just carve this thing flat straight across, it's hard to believe that with these big spaces here that it looks like this when it's done, ready for even more, maybe possibly polishing. And of course this has thousands and thousands and thousands of years of weathering on it too. And this all seems to be smoothed out around an entrance to the pyramid. Well, were they going to do the whole pyramid like this, or just leave it rough? I don't see any actual evidence of the ancient stone carving technology here, because this could have been done with chisels. But I do see the knobs right here, and we see some other stuff going on here, but the edges here are smooth, almost as if they had the technology to just scoop, or I should say dissolve, the stone. And here it is, looking even more smooth and polished. If the whole pyramid was covered with these rough stones, but you could smooth it down to this, then was that the plan? And also, where are all the stones at? If this thing was completely covered, even these stones would make quite a large pile around the bottom. So it looks like the pyramids have just been quarried for hundreds of years, and every one of those stones has been stolen, as far as I'm concerned. But this looks like granite. Very hard stone, and notice the smooth interface here, the curved smooth interface with the smooth stone in that. And again, it looks as if you just continue to smooth them out like this all the way across. All those big gaps disappear and you end up with this. And these rough stones, by the way, do have smooth sides on the sides and the tops and the bottoms. I don't think the backs are necessarily perfectly smooth. But back to this one, or I should say back to this one, you can see up here on the top that they are pretty smooth and everything fits tightly together, and we do have the same knobs. And the importance of the knobs is that we see knobs in Peru, and we've basically dated those stones at least 10,000 years old, and because of the three different stages of the types of stone building in Peru, as far as the knobs are concerned, then they probably go back 20 or even 30,000 years. So to me, if I'm seeing the same knobs all over the pyramid like this, then this pyramid could also be up to 30,000 years old at least. At least that's my reasoning anyway. So on to the next photo. And I forget the names of these pyramids, but this is the one that had the perfectly smooth stone, casing stones, I should say. And again, where are all the stones? They're all gone, millions of them. And I'm not sure about the technology here, because all of this could have been quarried and flattened out. I have to give the Egyptians credit, because they were fantastic builders, but then they could have just copied somebody else too. And this is the top of the same pyramid, but what I want to point out here is some interesting building techniques that I didn't really notice until lately, where we have these stones on this layer going up through 2 layers and then supporting this layer above. And we see that all over. Up here, here's another one. Here's one that goes up through these stones up here, and these are all laid in an angle. And this is the same pyramid that had the smooth casing stone at the bottom. And all those stones are gone, just disappeared. I don't believe the theory that they just shook apart and all of the stones ended up, well, they should be on the ground, but they're not, so they were taken away. So who's to say then? Somebody said, well, it was easier to start at the bottom and go up, but the way this is built, that's not really the case. I would say they found a weak spot here and then just got one out, and then the pyramid being smooth, they just slid them down the side of the pyramid. They landed down at the bottom in the sand. At least that's my theory anyway. And just another view of the smooth stones over here that looks like the grinding was in progress. Now, did they just not finish this, or that was it? Because, like I said, if you grind these off straight across, it's all smooth and flat like that. So was that the plan? I would think so. Otherwise, maybe these stones wouldn't all fit that tightly, but they seem to. And we have more stuff here, but no real signs of the stone carving technology, which we'll get to in a second here. And the Osirian. Now, the thing is about this is that we have, let me zoom in here. Well, for one thing, these blocks here are obviously, to me, way pre-dynastic, and this place shows several different generations of building. But on this far wall here, this is kind of interesting. This looks like it was added after these stones were in. Then someone came along and did this. And what's interesting about that back wall is that it has knobs, and these are square knobs. It also has these grinding scoop marks, like somebody came in with the scoop tool and scooped out the granite here. There would be no sense in doing that with a chisel. And in order to make these knobs, you know, you have to grind the whole stone down and just leave that part up. And a lot of these look like they're more square, which is probably easier to do quickly. It's just to disintegrate the rock going this way and then this way to get these square knobs. And this seems to go all the way down to about here, and then it changes a little bit down here. It's not quite so knobby, and I have a different view here. But okay, but the significance here again is the knobs and the scoop marks, which are found in Peru, and we know that those stones like Sacsayhuaman are at least 10,000 or more. I've dated some of those earlier walls there at 5 or 10,000 years earlier than that even. And who knows what the original purpose of this place was. It might have been for water for some reason and part of some big water system. But here we are on that back wall again, and over in the corner there's a square knob right here that looks pretty well preserved, probably because it was in the corner. Now we see some of the earlier stonework over here, which is actually higher than this. My theory, of course, because I don't know for sure, is that this site was probably quarried and then repaired later. So if this is a repair work, then that was about 10, 12,000 years ago, right here, or more. And here's an overall view of the Osirian with the repair work over here, which I'm dating to be really, really old, pre-dynastic, but I'm not a Egyptologist or anything, but just going by looks only. Then we have over here this wall. Look how high it is, and look at all the stones that have been taken from here. This wall was probably a little higher even, maybe come all the way over here, went down there, and it just looks like this thing has been so quarried, it's hard to tell what's going on. It's probably why everybody's so confused. But it looks like we have the oldest construction here, with newer here, and then probably even newer elsewhere around here. I'm not sure. I haven't really been here. So anyway, there it is. And I'm sure we've all seen this photo. But we have the square groove here. Sharp corners, very, very, very smooth. What looks to be pretty perfect symmetry here. This surface is completely smooth, and of course the drill hole, which so we know they had core drills, which is no big deal really. But look at these big crystals in the granite here. They are just completely smoothed off. Yes, I know you can do this with chisels, and people have imitated this stuff and saying, well, because I can do it, then there wasn't any, advanced technology involved here whatsoever, just because they can smooth off a couple pieces of granite. Well, it's true, this probably might have been smoothed off, but hammers and chisels on granite, just so hard to believe. So before we get into the actual devices, I want to show you this thing again. You just have to imagine that these little holes in the front here are the energy emitters, whatever they may have looked like. I don't know, of course, but the shape of the tool was curved, and I don't know what the rest of it looked like, but it had to be something fairly easy to control, probably by a person or even a drone. These devices are all different shapes and sizes, as evidenced by the different types of evidence that we see. So they couldn't have been just one device. They probably had many devices. Depends on what they wanted to do. We have to realize that if they had this technology, that they probably had a long time to develop it, okay? And we know that a lot of this happened tens of thousands of years ago. So, my theory on that, explaining how they had ancient technology, advanced technology back then, was that whoever had the technology wasn't even from Earth. The people that, and they built for the people that were here or occupying Earth at the time, which I think all these different groups of people were transferred to Earth somehow. Maybe their planet was having problems, whatever. So these different groups of people were brought to Earth where they could live and flourish, and these builders apparently were part of the deal, and they came in and built stuff. And you have to think about this. Every planet there is has one thing in common. It has rock and mountains. So if you're going to be going to different planets throughout the galaxy even, when you get there, you're going to need tools to build. And since there are no Home Depots or anything around that you can go buy stuff, you have to make everything. And the logical choice is to make everything out of stone, because you have the technology right here. You don't even have to touch the stone, because the energy and maybe the vibration, or the combination of the two, is all predetermined. The depths can be set probably by the intensity of the energy. And we have these global builders because we see the evidence, the same marks all over the whole world. which is just another big clue that it was one group of beings that went around doing this stuff. And they did it for the people that were, you know, the different, let's call them little mini civilizations, because those people were probably just farmers. They were just relocated there, and they were only worried about the food, the shelter, clothing, stuff like that. There's no reason for them to have tools like this. So there had to be just a certain group of people that had the tools or access to the tools. And they don't leave these things lying around to be found by us later. You take your tools with you. So, with that said, since they did have the technology, the devices can be of any shape. I see evidence of round tools where they could just lower this thing down into the stone and just use it as a carver like we do today with wood. So here we are at the part where we're supposed to believe that all they used was a stone, maybe hammers, possibly chisels, but basically just beating the rock with a stone made all these patterns here and these shapes. And they even threw a stone down there to try to make us believe that was how it was done. I know that people have shown that they can do stuff with stones. Of course you can pound on a rock and chip away at it, but I doubt that you're going to make an obelisk or a lot of these other things that were obviously made out of granite, pre-dynastic and so on. You just can't do that stuff with just a pounder. It's just impossible. And there's a lot of shapes that the pounders can't really make. You can't make square, sharp edges with pounders. So how is that done? So here's a typical example. This is the bottom of the trench by an obelisk they were supposedly trying to build. And you can see the scoop marks at the bottom, but they continue up the side too. They go down one side, all the way around, and then up the other side. I'm not sure if I was pounding away here that I would be able to make this pattern here. It might help me keep track of what I'm doing, but to be pounding on the sides and the bottom at the same time just doesn't make any sense. There's only room for so many people in here. It would take them absolutely forever to pound all the way down to here. The only thing that could be is that this stone was disintegrated with a device, because it's the same shape all over. I can't believe every stone pounder in here had, was doing everything exactly the same. The same rounded out grooves, the same style and everything. And you can see that these little valleys go down the side all the way up. And to believe that you would even attempt something like this just by pounding the rock with stone and making some gigantic megalithic structures is I just can't believe it, okay? Not believing that at all. And of course here we are getting close to the finished product here with using nothing more than pounding stones on the ground. And you can come up with these beautiful obelisks that are perfectly straight. How do you get that many workers pounding away with stones to keep everything perfectly straight and symmetrical like this? Any big flaw and the whole thing would have to be thrown away. Maybe there's years of pounding going on here just to get to this point. And of course, yes, this is a quarry, so you're going to see a lot of stones being cut out here, like over here, But how do they get pounders down in here? I don't understand that at all. There's no room to pound down here. That had to be cut out with something. And you can still see the curved striations here. And the place that's covered with them all over the place. So if you had that tool handy, I could see where someone would be out there practicing away, you know, getting the feel of it before they, you know, try to take on the big obelisk. I would imagine one big mistake and that's it for you. So I guess with pounders you can't get in too much trouble that way, but I mean, come on, you can't make this just by pounding the rock. And if you did, it would take you 1,000 years. And what happens if, you know, like this one had cracks? Look at all that wasted labor and time. So in this photo, we can see that we can see the pattern here, and we can see that it goes all the way up the side and then all the way around over here. But then it goes down to the bottom and comes up back on the side of this one. So were they going to make another one out of this? Was that supposed to be a smaller one? And look at the way these scoop marks here. Everything is curved just right. If you were pounding away, wouldn't it be kind of hard to leave these ridges here? That wouldn't seem like they would just, you'd be tempted just to break them off and make this thing flat. Maybe that was some way of keeping track of how deep they were going. But in any case, that's an awful lot of pounding and chiseling there. And you can tell by the shapes that these are all curved. But that doesn't mean you were doing that with a stone. If you're dissolving this stone with some kind of disintegrator, and you can see the shape and the size of the tool right here. They're all the same. And again, do we have feats here that you couldn't do with a pounder, like this corner down here? How would you pound out a corner? I mean, it's not the sharpest corner in the world, but this is fairly sharp up here. And then we have this edge over here. How did they pound right up to the edge of this without disturbing the stone behind? So you have to look for these really subtle clues here. And it looks like they came along here with the scooper. I call it a scooper, but it was really just a curved disintegrator, just like the thing I showed you. So this is one of the best examples of the advanced ancient stone carving technology. A lot of people think that this was made with a big saw blade. Even though this is straight, the edge is curved, we have striations that go straight across here. I don't know of any kind of a saw that makes straight lines like that. I don't know of any saw that is, I can't even imagine a 40-foot diameter saw, which is what some people think. And another thing is too, this edge on these kind of surfaces, when you get to the edge, it's always curved, and it curves up. Well, there's a reason for that. It's the device. Here's another view of the same so-called saw cut. And we have these striations that go through here. And all this means, those striations, is that those little holes in the device that I showed you are what's shooting out the energy here. Obviously, one little beam isn't going to do you any good. You're going to have rows of them so you can take swaths out at the same time. In this closer view, we can see the striations pretty easily here. Might even be able to magnify this. And notice the overlapping stone here. It did have a crack. Maybe they were just looking to see if there was a crack there or not. And that could be why work was stopped on this stone. Too many cracks. And notice the difference in the weathering here. This is the original stone, which looks quite weathered to me. It doesn't look like it just broke off that way. It's been severely weathered since. But this side, very little weathering. This could have been done a couple of weeks ago. So why is this so well preserved and this is not? Well, I think it's a result of the process of disintegrating the stone. Somehow rearranges the surface a little bit, makes the you know, the molecules tighter somehow, and just makes them more resistant, because you can take polished granite and let it sit out in the open air in the mountains for thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, and it still shines. Let me show you. So we have in the Sierra Nevada range in western United States evidence of glaciers. Now, the last glaciers to sweep through the park, meaning Yosemite, I think, melted 10,000 years ago. The most recent glacial advance started around 50,000 years ago, but at least 3 distinct periods of glacial advance, and possibly 10 or more, have swept over the Sierra Nevada since the Ice Age began roughly 2.4 million years ago, and we are still in the Ice Age. And here we have a sample of glacier polished granite. Now that has been sitting there for at least 10,000 years. And notice there is no erosion, except, you know, over here, of course, and that looks just like the stone we just looked at. But the reason that this is not eroded is because it's polished, it's smooth. There's nowhere for the water to seep into, like down in these areas here. The water and ice gets into these little cracks and crevices, expands and contracts, and we have expansion and contraction of the entire rock. And so this becomes very resistant to erosion. But this has been 10,000 years. I'm simply saying here that granite can sit in a polished state for tens of thousands of years and look like it was polished just a few weeks ago. More granite that's been polished at least 10,000 years ago, maybe more. And you can see we're in the weather here. We get snow, rain, everything here. And you can even see the striations in the granite still. So you know which way the glacier was going. And this photo is by Eric in SF. Unfortunately, he didn't get into the picture here. But this is the Devil's Postpile National Monument, Madera County, California. And that's columnar basalt, which usually you see in columns. And this shows you the power of the glaciers. And it just ground these things right down to where it looks like a tile floor. And you know that didn't happen overnight. Who knows how long, how many hundreds of years that glacier was sliding over this stone to do this. And this is, of course, badly eroded. You can see the striations here. So one time, this probably was pretty shiny. So could this be 20,000 years old? We don't really know. But we do know when the ice ages, well, actually, they're glaciations in the last ice age were. This is all that's left now. This is all granite, by the way. Ancient batholiths. And here's a cirque. Of course, the glacier was a lot higher than this, filled the whole picture, carved all of this out, and then went downhill, carrying all the rock with it. And there's other forms of chemical weathering, hydrolysis, and here's pretty much the rundown on the weathering of granite. And look how they're showing the clay mineral sheet silicates in the granite, which is, of course, kaolinite. This is exactly the crystal structure that I'm talking about that can be disintegrated with sound or directed energy. And I think I went over this before. Here are your main minerals in, say, white granite. And these are all minerals with a distinct crystal structure. And anything with a, I think with this crystalline structure, no matter what size the crystals are, can be disintegrated using ultrasound or directed energy, or both, a combination of the two, possibly to help control the intensity of the beam and the depth of your disintegrating cut. Another massive display of glacier polished granite. in the Sierras. You can always tell where the glaciers have been. Here we have glacier polished basalt columnar of basalt, and you can see it's still shining after tens of thousands of years, and it always has this layer that peels off below where it's you know, shiny and unweathered, although this is a little bit weathered. But the moisture gets in under these little edges here, and then when it freezes it pops them up, and this just keeps growing. And does anybody want some slabs of granite? This is exfoliation, and what happens is the granite comes off in sheets because of the temperature differences between the outside of the rock and the inside of the rock. So we have these different expansion rates, and granite will come off in layers like this. Now, let's say you were building something, you wouldn't even have to cut the granite out. Just come up here and grab a slab and start carving. Half Dome was created by glaciers, and you can see the exfoliation perfectly right here. It's so typical of granite. And I did say that was Half Dome in Yosemite. And jointing is another way that it erodes, because once this starts happening, like I said, the water and ice and everything gets in here, freezes, you have contraction, expansion, and this is pretty common. Here's a side view of the so-called saw cut. And I think people think it's a saw just because it looks a little curved here. That doesn't mean it's a saw cut. It's not even curved down here. It's actually straight. And it still has straight lines going through it. So I think because of the straight lines, it's impossible that it could have been any kind of a circular saw. And if it wasn't a bandsaw, because of the shape of the edge here. And a bandsaw would be too hard to work. Well, how you do? Lift the stone up onto the saw or what? I mean, that's impossible. And some of these pictures aren't really in order, but I wanted to show you this one because it was a perfect example of the method of construction of the pyramids. It's kind of stunning to me, really, to see this jumble of rocks in here. They don't even look like they're cut. They look like they're just, well, this one looks like it'll fit. So they just kind of squeezed them in here. That looks awfully sloppy to me. If this pyramid was built by, oh, I don't know, someone, let's say 10, 20, 30, 50,000 years ago, would they have done it this sloppily? But this technique of having the upright stone here going through, you know, several layers of stones to support up above, seems to me that you wouldn't really know how to do that unless you had experience, you know, making pyramids and knowing what's going to happen. So these stones are scattered, you know, all over inside. I don't know how far in these go, probably just the first couple of layers, I guess, but that's kind of interesting. So back at the quarry, where the obelisk is, this was all done pounding stones. They managed to cut out the rock over here somehow, pounding stones. They don't even really look like they were pounded that much. And we have this. I'm still confused why this, unless they thought, well, okay, this is too big, it's cracked and so on. After all that work of pounding for years and years, they come up with this. No, that was scooped out with a device. Look, they even did it up here. And over here. All this was disintegrated. I don't know if it was a handheld, probably a handheld device. And who did it? I don't know. Was it drones? Was it people? Or did they have some kind of strange slave beings that did this? But it wasn't pounders or hammers and chisels. It just doesn't look like the you know, that you would even do this with hammers and chisels if you had them. And this is one of the, supposedly like a capstone. But you can see the little grind marks. So this is obviously a smaller tool. You couldn't do this with a pounder. How could you make that shape with a pounder? I don't know, maybe you could. Some of them are kind of long. But this was definitely somebody who took a tool, they dragged it along here, and they scooped off the rock. Why did they do this? I don't know. It almost looks like vandalism to me. And of course we have these. So I'm going to hand you a pounder, a brass chisel, and a hammer. And I want you to make me this box. And I want it to be absolutely perfect, just like this one. I want all these dimensions to be perfect. I want to see nice square edges on here. Very sharp edges I want to see. If I see one little dent in here, it's your life. You will die. So make sure it's perfect. So here's your pounders and here's your chisels. Go to work. I don't know. Pretty hard to believe. How do you pound out a square inside of a piece of stone like this so perfectly? And these rounded edges up here. I don't even think if you had a chisel. And this is hard stone. This is not like sandstone. And look how super well preserved it is. I mean, this thing's been laying around on the ground for how long? 10,000 years? This surface had to have been cut out and shaped using, now this is where the particle beam, there's a focus particle beam laser comes in. And most likely this was mounted somewhere, and probably they had the equivalent of a CNC machine, but instead of using cutting edges and stuff, they simply used the particle beam tool. And how many boxes would you have to make before you came up with a perfect one? I'm not sure that you would even live that long, really. And if you try to find tool marks on here, I don't think you're going to find any. It's just too smooth, and these edges are way too sharp. If you had rough cut this thing out and then tried to sand it down looking like that, you still wouldn't get it that flat and perfect. Especially this work up here. It is just too symmetrical to even do by hand. Now, I haven't actually gone and measured the distance from here to here and then distance from here to here to see just how perfect this thing is. But if I ever get my hands on this thing, I'm going to have my tape measure out and my straight edge. Hammers, pounders, chisels, I don't know, man. Impossible. And look how square some of these blocks are. Like this piece back here. That was sliced using some kind of focus particle beam. Because the thing is, it's not a laser. I've heard people talking about, oh, I know all about lasers. Yeah, you can cut stone, but you can't. Lasers melt stuff. They don't make this kind of a smooth surface. If you have a particle beam laser that can cut through stone, then you can just slice the stone just like it were a piece of balsa wood and a sharp knife. And so down in the Assyrian we see that same exfoliation that I showed you with the granite, and we can see that the surfaces here are still pretty pristine, showing a little wear and tear here, but still, could this be 10, 20,000 years old? It looks like it might be. And this was pretty much underground too, and we still have this. So how long did this take to happen? So I think we can use the polished granite example to possibly date some of this stuff if we're trying to figure out how much weathering has been going on. A lot of geologists, they look and they go, well, that looks like so many years. Well, how can you explain that when we have granite that stays smooth and shiny for 20,000 years in rough weather? And all you have to do is zoom in on this box or whatever it is. And you can see some impossible feats here, like this piece here. That's all, part of this. It's not added on. And look at that. You couldn't do that with it. I don't think you could do that with a chisel. I just really don't. And I know a little bit about masonry, but if somebody wanted me to do this, I wouldn't be able to do it. And these sharp edges, everything being so straight and perfect and smooth, uneroded. Abu Rawash. Here's that stone again. And notice that it's curved. That would discount the saw theory right there. You can't saw it if it's, at an angle like that and it has the straight striations. Somebody made that stone like that because it was so easy to do. They just took the disintegrator tool and dragged it over the stone, back and forth. Of course, they had a steady hand. They were experienced. They've been doing this stuff for a long time. I'd be just totally blown away if it really was drones. And then here we go. Let me zoom in on here just a little bit. But this is probably the most perfect example of their advanced particle beam technology that they used for carving and shaping stone. And right here you can see the curvature. They made a swath right through here. And notice also again, you can see how there's the stone just seems like it's been treated or preserved somehow. I don't think anybody came along and polished this. I think that that is a direct result of the process of using high energy stone carving devices. Somehow it does something molecular to the surface that makes it completely, almost totally resistant to weathering. And right along the edge you see that it's not really sharp like you would think a saw would be, and it's curved anyway, but this is the shape of the tool. This was the size of the tip of the device, and they're all curved a little bit. I don't know why they're curved, except I guess if they were perfectly straight, you'd have that sharp edge along here, and you might accidentally make a groove. So better to have it a little bit rounded. And if you're doing a lot of woodworking, you would know that if you use something perfectly straight on this, that you would see sharp lines along the edges here. Just another view of the same stone. You can see the long disintegrated cuts here. There's one over there on the other side. You can see the perfectly straight lines. Here's the edge of it. You can see that after at least 10,000 years, how smooth and shiny that is. It's almost brand new. And that layer only goes down a few micrometers, or maybe a millimeter or two. And that's it. And that's all you need to do is to treat the very surface, to keep it from eroding. Now this side over here wasn't apparently treated as well, and it's a little bit more eroded. It's rougher. It's not smooth and shiny. So this was just probably a rough cut here. And here's some extreme evidence. I'm going to have to zoom in on this one. But this is probably the best evidence for a high energy device that disintegrated the rock, and all you really needed to do was just drag it over the stone. There's no effort here. Notice the upward curved edge here. Everywhere this thing is used, it curves just up right on the edge. Looks like it's fairly flat, but it curves up right on the edges. And then this one here looks like they went a little low and came down through here. We can see the same striations. Those weren't done with chisels. And you can forget about pounders. So what is the explanation other than they used a focused particle beam tool with possibly sound to literally disintegrate that rock as they dragged it over, which means that the rock was turned into, and if you look at the size of these grooves, and also the fact that it's smooth between the grooves, that's another clue. Look how smooth this is over here. And notice that these crystals here reacted a lot more nicely to the tool. Everything is very smooth. Those are mineral crystals. If you were to hit one of those with a chisel or try to chisel your way through here, these things would just break, and your whole work would be ruined. And zoomed in, we can see the striations. It would be pretty hard to do this with a chisel and keep such a straight line like these straight lines down here. And right here you can see where the beam, they're very fine particle beams though, but they're arranged in rows or patterns on a device like the one I just showed you. And notice how deep these little grooves are, and the separation here between the two, it's a little higher. It's almost like a finer version of this device tool mark, where you have the striations equally spaced. But what's so unique about this is that at the end of the striations you can see these little holes where it looks like the material almost looks melted. But I think probably what happens is this device, as it's disintegrating the stone, you can see the size of the little particle beam coming through here, and it stopped and it just kept on going. So obviously the slower you drag the tool, the more debris it takes. Look like it hesitated a few times. A hole here, 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 here. Here's one, here's one, here's one. This one comes down through here, terminates over here. We see the same, almost like liquefied stone, but then it hardens once the beam goes away. So that's extremely interesting. It's also extreme advanced stone carving technology. This is probably the best evidence, one of the best evidences for that you will ever see. And this is, I think this one was from Petra, but I've seen these in India as well. So it seemed pretty obvious that whatever the tool was that they had that dragged through here, it didn't cut the stone, they didn't blast it out of there, it was disintegrated, but controlled. And here's another rounded edge. You can tell exactly what the shape of the end of this device looked like. This one kind of flat in the middle but rounded on the edges. This probably came up a little bit, but then they came through here with this one, and it looks like they went a little too deep, or it just didn't matter, and that just happens to be there because for some reason they gave up on this stone. It might have had it, probably because it had those cracks in it. I really doubt that this was done with some kind of a grinder. I guess it's conceivable that they did have some kind of a grinder. That might account for the striations. It might account for the rounded edges on here. But it just seems to me that a grinder would just be so primitive. And the way they have these deep grooves too, I mean the bigger grooved area here where it's more like a long gouge. I think a grinder, if it was a rotating grinder, these lines, I'm not sure they'd be so straight, and although those could have been the cutters on the grinder, but how long is that grinder going to last? I mean, don't forget, there's thousands and thousands of feet of this stuff done. I don't think a grinder would last that long, even if it was diamond tipped. And here we can see the extreme craftsmanship, really, to make this stone curved like they wanted it. And you can see the disintegrated scoop marks here. This is the one that we're just looking over here. You see the edge comes off very sharp. So it wasn't a chisel, it wasn't a saw, because you can't saw curved things. Why anybody thought that was a saw is beyond me. And here's, of course, core drills. And I've even made square holes like this in wood. You drill the holes down and then you can get into the file and file along the edges or chisel it out a little bit more to make it a perfect square. This almost looks like it was done later, but here's the smooth granite here. This looks like rose granite at first to me. Totally smooth, everything nice and flat and perfect, and here's another one of those grooves. But it looks like they could have the bottoms of these tube drills too. I thought that they just drilled like this and then broke off the part that's sticking up. That's why it's perfectly round here, and then they're rough in the middle, because when the tube drill gets down to a certain depth, they pull the tube out and then they just bust off the round cylinder that's there. They just bust them off. Looks like they went a little deeper over here. And was this even a core drill to begin with? I know we see these core drill holes all over the place, and we can see the depth, and we kind of tell how fast it went down and everything, and it's supposed to be, they cut down really fast, faster than we could cut stone today. So if it's faster than we could cut today, and we cut these holes with diamond-studded hole saws or core drills, then they were faster. So maybe these weren't really core drills at all. Maybe this just happens to be another particle beam tool that just happens to have a circular array on it, so that you just run it down just like a core drill and then snap it off, but without all the drilling. This shows the shadow on the back wall here, which I'm contending is at least as old or older than Sacsayhuaman in Peru, and also that this is a completely different kind of construction over here compared to everything else. And of course the place has been badly quarried, and these stones over here, they're all laying up here. Well, I doubt if somebody rolled them up there from here. So I think this complex was actually a lot bigger to begin with, and it just got quarried and then repaired and then quarried, and this is what's left. And here we are in the Serapeum. These boxes. Now, they are very shiny, and they look like they've been varnished. And they've been varnished possibly with that same stuff that it actually turns the stone to jelly or something. Because I thought that this was shiny at first because of the result of the particle beam tool, in that it reconditioned the surface and made it all shiny. But if you look at the bottoms of these boxes, it's almost as if they painted them with something varnish, and then the varnish is underneath, kind of dribbled down along the bottom. So they had something that they coated these things with, and it's a miracle to me that no one has figured out what it is. Somebody somewhere had to have taken a sample of something. But these boxes are very precisely done nevertheless. You can't do it with hammers and chisels. And these boxes are the same ones that were found. There's one in the hallway that wasn't completed. It's all roughed out, and then the top is laying behind it, just a big square piece of granite or andesite. And so they got them down there unfinished, and then they did the work down here, which seems kind of strange. Why would they just finish the work up above and then bring the finished boxes down? They would be a lot smaller and lighter. So that's kind of a mystery. But pounders and chisels, I don't think so. And just the fact that it's not pounders and chisels and anything that we can even think of, saws and whatnot, proves right there that it's advanced technology. So was this entire pyramid covered with these rough-faced stones that were precisely fitted together like we see here, so that all we have to do is just grind them off? That's an awful lot of chiseling to do, and how would you do that? How would you get so many people to grind on this thing? I mean, with chisels and hammers and whatever they had, all at once, and still come out, like this in the end? How would one guy know what the other guy's doing? It just doesn't make any sense. Humans are not like machines. And again, were they planning to do the whole pyramid like this? Was the work interrupted? I think maybe it wasn't, only because this is smoothed out around the entrance to the side of this pyramid, which I don't think if it was a tomb they would be advertising an entrance to the pyramid, which gives credence to the fact that the pyramids were not tombs. Even though some of the other smaller pyramids were probably tombs, only because they were copied, copycatting the big tomb, the big pyramid. But they couldn't make big pyramids like this. And isn't that an awful lot of work just to bury a guy that says he's a god? I don't know. And more evidence, as far as I'm concerned, that these builders, maybe they were just called in to put the casing stones on. I don't know. But some of these stones that are lying around have extremely smooth, flat edges, as if they were cut with a saw or a focused particle beam laser. And please note, we have knobs, and this is funny, we have knobs on the top and the bottom. Very rarely do you see the knobs on the top and the bottom. They're almost always on the bottom, like these are. And what kind of erosion are we looking at here? Are these things all busted off because of all the stones that were rolled down the side of the pyramid as it was being salvaged and quarried? Or is this erosion? And were they supposed to be rounded like this, or were they square? Because I noticed a lot of these knobs are just so worn down that the original shape is not there anymore. Either they were, round, sticking out round, cylinder shaped, or even, squares like we saw over the Osirian. And in this photo we can see some real obvious quarrying was done here, and they just went layer after layer here. Here's a remaining piece of granite, and this one was apparently encased in the granite, which of course is a lot harder to work with than limestone is, like we see back here. But look at this. Like I said, the place has been quarried for quite a long time, and you can see where they drilled the holes here. Like, say, the stone over here, they would just drill a line of holes through it, pound the wood in or whatever, and then bust them loose. And I don't know, I'm not sure if they even cut a line in it to make it break even easier, because it's cut a shallow cut, and then pound in the stones to break these things apart. You can see the holes over here, actually drilled holes. And so these have all been broken off. The rest of the stone was stolen. I think if we look around Cairo, we'll find half the pyramids over there. But what I don't understand about this stone is this surface layer here. I don't think this had a crack in it to begin with. It just went like that. That was a saw cut. I think it should be the same color as the rest of this. So is there something about the outside of this stone that is been physically altered somehow to be more resistant? Because let's not forget, these things have been laying around here for tens of thousands of years. And essentially the stone, like over here, looks pretty new. And we have zero erosion on the granite. And the limestone in back looks kind of eroded. So according to this erosion on the back side of these stones, and this was all laid out pretty good. That's nice and level. This is all nice. It's not just a big jumble of stones back there either. But if you look at the erosion, could that possibly tell us how long these stones have been missing off the surface? I think so. This is another non-saw cut. Pretty obvious. We have the sharp edge along here, slightly striated. Almost looks like someone just took a knife and cut through this. This looks like it's travertine, which is actually fairly soft. But if it was a laser, and by the way, lasers don't make curved cuts either, like on that flat one we were looking at. That couldn't have been a laser. It's only when you have perfectly flat surfaces that it could be a particle beam laser. This was probably not a laser unless they came from the direction of up here down this way with it and then just cut downwards like this. Or most likely they just started cutting on this with a device, dragging the device across the rock, maybe by hand. Maybe they had some kind of a guide so that it would keep it straight and flat. Obviously though, the main point here is no hammers, no chisels, no pounders. What's left? And again, there's a smooth, kind of very rounded edge along here. Same striations here. This piece looks like it's at a different angle. But there's no way that could be a saw, or chisels, or hammers, or pounders. It would be impossible just to do this edge over here, where it just comes right off the edge of the stone when they're doing this. You wouldn't be able to just make it as if you took a scraper and just scrape that stone right off. So, and this over here too. This rock actually, sometimes it looks like it overhangs a little bit, almost like it was a blade. But since we don't have any of their devices, we don't know what the shapes of the ends of them were. So this is the same stone off to the left side of where we were just looking. If we zoom in a little bit here, you can see the crack here. But here's that slightly curved edge with this little piece sticking up here, and these over here. All of this. If you were chiseling away on this, that would just break off. You wouldn't be able to do this. And another piece of evidence showing the tool was just dragged across the rock, disintegrated the stone as it was dragged across this rock. You can see the striations very well here and how perfectly straight they are. I think even doing this by hand it would be hard to get straight lines like that. But, you know, these guys were skilled. And I can see where if you had a real steady hand, you could make a straight line like that just by dragging this tool over. So I think they had some other help too, like probably some kind of guides to hold, that they could slide these tools along or something to have a little bit more control. And notice the typical rounded up edge along the side, and then it just comes right off the here, just like it was just cut right off, just like this was clay, and they just swooped through here with a soft scooper. And also how resistant this is to weathering. And that's another sign that the composition of the rock, not the composition, but the actual structure of the stone right on the very surface has been altered to make it weather, erosion resistant, or at least weather resistant. And here's more evidence of the ability of them to just dissolve the stone, and dissolve it probably disintegrated it. I don't think it got hot at all. It just disintegrated the stone, turned it into sand or powder or maybe even nanodust. But this would be another impossible thing to do with stone. In fact, this looks like andesite or something. It looks like it's incredibly hard. Just another photo showing the 8 sides of the pyramid. And we have all these, supposedly these workers' buildings down here. I'm not sure really what's going on. I think through the centuries, probably a lot of this stuff was added around as the pharaohs claimed this as their own works. And then we have the copycat ones down here. And I guess those are tombs. Maybe these were turned into tombs later, but I don't think this was originally built as a tomb. I think this is the one with the boathouse over here or something. No signs of advanced technology here. Just wanted to point out that this pyramid, some of it is the bedrock that was there before. These aren't even stones. It's all solid bedrock. And they just cut it out and then shaped it and then built on top of it probably to save stones, but for stability too. So back to this one, the tool obviously somehow liquefied the stone as it was blasting the stone out as it went. The beam just comes down here. I don't know if it was liquefying the stone or turning it to powder or what, but obviously it did this, and then it hardened. So how can you liquefy a stone like that and then have it harden? There's just something so weird. Because if you look at this line here, this is I think this is the layering in the actual stone itself. I don't think these are tool marks. And it does kind of go right through that. And the way this one's almost folded over here. But you can see all these little holes. This is where the tool hesitated just for a split second probably. Hammers and chisels don't do that. That right there alone, this one photo, almost proves some kind of focused particle beam and sonic technology was used to shape the rock, not only doing coarse work, but doing fine work as well. Don't forget, these tools can be of any size. This one, obviously, if you go out on this picture, out a little ways, zoom out, you'll see all of these grooves are equally distanced, and this particular tool had, I think it only had two beams on it. So they were only to get, a little bit at a time. This is probably done by hand. And the device that they used only had, two beams. This tells you how big the beam was, right here. Solid proof. And it's also solid proof because you can't reproduce this. And there's a couple of YouTube channels that say there was no advanced technology. They can do it themselves. Well, they can't do this. And those channels are fake. I'm not going to tell you which channels are. You're just going to have to figure it out. And here's a big hunk of evidence right here. Hammers, chisels, pounders? What did they use to do this? It wasn't even on a lathe. I think this was done by a computer. Some kind of a computerized drone. It's the only way you can be that precise. Human hands cannot do this. They can't be that symmetrical. And then to make one after another, after another, after another, and they're all exactly the same, like clones of each other. Solid evidence right there in plain sight. And look how smooth that is. I think that's granite. Just pretty hard. And then we have these lines again, just like on those boxes that we were looking at. Same style. So whoever made those boxes made these too. And they didn't use hammers, chisels, and pounders. It's impossible. And here's another aerial view of this. Now, if you had the device that could just disintegrate the stone very easily, obviously this one was of the same size. Look at this. I mean, over here. Maybe I better zoom that in just a little. But look at the size of these. They're all the same. How could you do that with a pounder? And look at these edges over here. Look how sharp they are. And this one's on top of this one, or this one's on top of that one. I don't know. But look at here. Scoop marks. Right here. And why on earth, if you were pounding, why would you do this? Why would you do this to the obelisk? I mean, that's a big hole in that thing. I know they were going to grind it down, but that looks a little far. So, was this after they gave up and this was, a special school for using the tools, so they just came here to practice? But look how even this is. It was the same device. Did all of this. It's undeniable. Another reason I don't think this was pounder stones or anything is because why would you leave those ridges there? If you were pounding away with your stone, you'd be wanting to pound those ridges off to grind it down even more. And this looks like rose granite, very hard, and the spacing here on these scoop outs are pretty even. We have this flat surface here, we have this strange totally flat surface up here, except that it curves up over here. So what was going on here? Another photo showing the exact same style that was used on the walls at Saskatchewan. Now, this is probably the earlier style of the stone wall building that predated the later stone walls that look a lot smoother and more precise. So, couldn't that then be used to date the pyramids back even further? Or was this something smaller and then it was made into a bigger pyramid? That could be. And we've seen the megalithic sized stones inside the pyramid. I don't know. But here we have the same exact knobs. And, you know, that we find in Peru, and here they are in Egypt. Another piece of stone that looks like it was done with a CNC machine that used a focused particle beam cutter or grinder or whatever they used. But this is too precise to do by hand as far as I'm concerned. I know the Romans did some really good stuff. The Egyptians did a lot of stonework. But I don't think they did this. I see this one a lot, and people try to use this to prove that they did everything with saws. But, and this may have been a saw cut here. It kind of looks like a saw cut. And the color of the stone isn't right either. It's not weathered the same as all the rest. So I have a feeling that this stone was cut with some kind of a saw because they were trying to quarry it. So here we have, it looks like, well, this looks like sandstone down here. This looks like limestone. Not sure what this is. I guess that could be limestone. It's still pretty eroded. But notice the lack of erosion here on this surface compared to everything else here is totally eroded. Is this one of those surfaces that has been somehow treated either electronically or whatever to make it more resistant to weathering? And were these stones here added later to the pyramid? Or were they built with the pyramid? I would think they were built with the pyramid because we have these as the base over here. They are at an angle though, which means then maybe these were added later. Yeah, maybe, maybe not. And there's something else very strange about this photo. We have the perfectly preserved sharp edges over here, except for this strange erosion here and discoloration. And down here, now these stones are supposed to be going in at an angle to keep them from sliding out. Okay, so what happened here? This almost looks, and the stone that goes on the outside of this sat here along that ledge, I guess. Or did it? Because that almost looks like concrete was added in or something. And they smoothed it off somehow with that stuff just on the bottom layer here. This isn't advanced technology here, but just a couple questions that I don't have answers to. So another reason why I think this was a handheld device is if you look at these striations too, they're not perfectly straight. They're not as straight as an arrow. They could have been using some kind of a guide to assist them on dragging this tool over the rock. But if you look down here at these lines too, there's different widths, different spaces between. So as if it was dragged over twice. And they're not perfectly straight. These lines are pretty straight, but they're not straight as an arrow, They're just not absolutely perfectly straight. Like these come down here, but these seem to curve over this way. So they probably had to go over it more than once to make it smooth. Maybe work with the settings on the device to make it less powerful as they work their way down, so it doesn't take off so much. That way they can get a smoother surface. This, of course, was going to have to be polished off or something later. So this is basically just a rough cut. But it wasn't done with chisels. It had to be something shaped like this, with the emitters on the end. I would say it was probably handheld, but it could have been bigger. I don't know. But whatever it was, of the shape, it was a particle beam tool or high energy device. Oh, I forgot what this is. But just an example of what the Egyptians could do. They didn't have any advanced high technology stone carving devices, probably because the global builders that did all that work were probably long gone by the time the Egyptians got there. They were off on other worlds building other megalithic structures. And like I said with the pounders, there's areas here where you couldn't do this with a pounder, like over here. Look how sharp that edge is along there. You could do that with a pounder. I don't even know if you could do that with a chisel. So that's all I have for Egypt right now, because the video is getting a little bit long. I do have lots of other photos, but I think we get the main idea here, that the technology that is evidenced in Egypt is also found in Peru. Now, how can that be? I don't think these civilizations were connected directly, but I think they had the same builders working for them. And if these were the global builders that did this, that's going to make these pyramids a lot older than what we're led to believe, which was like they were built by the Egyptians. I really have my doubts. I don't have any proof that they did, and I don't really have, this is more like proof that they didn't. And we're seeing exactly the same scoop marks in Egypt and Peru and other places too. So that's almost proof right there that we had global builders. And that moves the dates of all this stuff a lot farther back. So in any case, whoever the global builders were, and they had this stone carving technology, they had the particle beam technology down. They knew that they could disintegrate stone with vibration. They could use vibration and probably the energy from the Earth's geomagnetic field for their own purposes, as they did probably on many other planets. And isn't it funny that one pyramid had smooth, was it limestone casing stones, totally smooth, and then we have this other pyramid, which is almost as big, with the rougher stones on the outside, that if you but that's so that you grind them down, and everything is totally flat. I mean, what planning? And just because they have knobs, and even these scoop marks, makes these structures a lot older, pre-dynastic Egypt, as far as I can tell. And like I said, I'm not an Egyptologist. There's a lot more people that know more about it than I do. So it's one thing, you know, to just show the evidence, but you have to explain why. You can't just, I don't think you can just say, yeah, look at there, signs of ancient advanced technology. Well, that's great. Now that we've now that we realize that, now it's time to investigate what is this technology? What can this technology be that it can disintegrate rock? Well, in one of my previous videos on this, I explained how humans today have a crude, focus-directed energy technology, which is not being used for peaceful purposes, because nothing ever is by humans. And I think if they worked with it a little bit more and started thinking about, you know, the crystal structures in these rocks and how to dissolve them or disintegrate it with just these energy tools, that could really change the face of construction in this world, because now everything could be made right from stone. And it would be so much easier than what we're doing now at the quarry with saws and so on. I mean, even though it's efficient, we have big saws and we can cut these stones out of the mountains pretty easily now. But, you know, if we had this better technology, it would make that a lot easier. And of course, I also explained how the stones were lifted. If you have this kind of technology and you're flying around in spaceships going from one planet to the other, obviously you've mastered anti-gravity. And I don't know how many of these stones were moved that way, but why would you move a stone the hard way when all you have to do is put like a gravity beam on it and just lift it up and put it where you want? I mean, it seems to be the most logical answer. You know, you're not going to have one technology and not have anything else. You're going to have the whole enchilada. And if I didn't know anything about modern day focused particle energy beams or sonic vibration capabilities and stuff, I never would have guessed when I looked at all those marks, the tool marks, that's what it was. So you kind of sort of have to know a little bit about technology in order to try to imagine it from there. You have to get outside the box. Realize, just because we don't have it now doesn't mean it never existed before. Humanoids have been around this galaxy for probably millions of years. And we're nothing but, we're newcomers here. Even if we'd been here for 1 million years, that's still kind of a newcomer, but we've only been here a few thousand years. We've developed pretty fast. I mean, look at the stuff we can build. Give us some plans, we can build anything. A jet, spaceships, buildings, you name it. If we've got the plans and the materials, humans can build it. Which is one nice thing about humans. We're actually sort of builders. But unfortunately, we're kind of off to a bad start with our money-based civilization, money, greed, power, fighting amongst each other. Now that all these different survivors of the original civilizations here can't seem to get along with each other, and now that we have our advanced technology, but if you think about it, it's only for weapons. Tell me why we are so advanced as a human race today on this planet, which is just a hodgepodge, just a mixture of a whole bunch of different kinds of people, humanoids from other places, and we can't even get along. And this technology that we're supposed to have, and so we think we're so advanced. How are we advanced? Look around you. What do you see? A smartphone? You have electricity. Electricity is no big deal. Electricity is not an advanced civilization. Anybody can make electricity. But can you harness the electromagnetic field of the earth That's advanced. We don't have that. If there's anything advanced, the government has it. We don't have it. As the masses, we'll never see it. It's just like we're not allowed to have these particle and energy beam stone carving tools, even if they had them. So it looks like our own technology may be our final end because of the nuclear power, the biological weapons, the chemical weapons, the greed, the power, hungry maniacs. It just doesn't look good for mankind's future on this planet. Of course, there will be survivors. There's a reset every once in a while, and humans will crawl out of the ashes and start anew. It seems to be the way this planet's been going. Civilizations that have been here hundreds of thousands of years ago are long gone. All evidence is gone because the planet is too dynamic. Everything erodes. You know, and our planet is, what, 5 billion years old? Our universe is 15 billion years old. Well, that's our universe. Well, I happen to think that there are more than one universe. That if you backed off from our universe and just kept going away from it until finally our universe looked like a star, I think you would see other stars. You would see other universes. And if you got far away enough, you would see clusters of universes. And where does it end? So, as far as us being advanced, I don't know. I think advanced really is more than just having the tools and the technology. It's a you know, a mindset. It's a frame of mind. It's how are you going to survive, you know, forever. I can even see where some humanoid races have altered themselves genetically to try to, so that they can perpetuate themselves into the future, which means that they've been fooling around with DNA and cloning and so on. Don't think that we're the only ones that ever tried that. And if you wanted to make your race of beings more resistant to this or that, or last longer, live longer, you can go ahead and make the genetic manipulations. So your race will continually be changing and adapting. But we haven't got to that point yet because we haven't been here that long. And honestly, I don't think we're going to be here for very much longer as a you know, civilization on this planet, at least not in the form we're in now. So with all that having been said, I'm gonna start the next video, part 5, and it's going to be on India and China. And looks like part 6, I'm not sure what part 6 is going to have in it, but probably everything that's left. So, I will see you later, and thanks for watching, and try to have an open mind, and stay safe. Don't do anything stupid as far as the coronavirus goes. Don't take any chances. Follow the rules. And like I said before, I think we'll probably make it. But how many more? How many more biological weapons are going to get loose? These biological weapons, the research and everything needs to be completely outlawed and banned. We cannot have it on the planet. I'd say this stuff is probably worse than nuclear weapons. We don't need to have those either. Weapons of mass destruction are only for killing your fellow humans. I just don't know what's wrong with people. You know, they just have this thing about fighting with each other forever. Sometimes I'm just plain embarrassed to even say I'm a human. But we're all reminded every day, several times every day, that we are just animals on this planet. So, anyway, sorry about the little rant there, but it had to be said. So, I'll see you on the next video. Stay safe, and have a good day if you can. Be sure to make any comments down below. I'm not afraid of comments. I've noticed that none of my videos, no one ever makes comments. I don't know why that is. Is it because everyone is just so shocked? Or are they just disgusted? Does anybody agree with anything I'm saying here? It'd be nice to know. And don't worry, I won't bite. Alright. Have a good one.